was a resident student at the college when she came home from her assignment in Canada. And everybody was sort of agog about, oh, Corita's going to be in Hollywood. It's wonderful. And I met her on a stairway, and I thought, she is something. She was just an A-plus person on every front. Personality, appearance, product.
I used to travel with her, and I saw how she connected with people and met everybody. And somehow she was able to share her wisdom, her humor, her love of the world.
To me, she just emanated a kind of energy that was light. And I know this all sounds very airy-fairy, but that's how it was when you were around her. For me, it was the joy of the Spirit. I saw the Holy Spirit working through her.
She brought such a joy to everything that she did. There was this playfulness, kind of joie de vivre about life, you know. She loved everything. From stop signs to to material, to flowers. Everything was a joy to her, I think, and that's catching.
Both the times in which she lived and the community that she was a part of were both important components to how her art and her life evolved. The community at that time was the largest religious community in Los Angeles. We staffed most of the Catholic schools, grammar, high school, and of course, the women's college, Immaculate Heart. She wouldn't have been Corita without the Immaculate Heart community. She had a vision, and it was encouraged.
She was the spirit of the whole college when we were here. It really was evident.
And we were roommates, so we were here in 1958. We were here for some of the first Mary's Days with the big banners and singing and dancing, which was great fun.
Yes, I think Mary laughed out loud. She laughed wholeheartedly, without rancor, with great compassion, and with real reverence. If she were here today in her physical nature, she would surely laugh. I wish you again happy Mary's Day. I would not call it other.
The head of the department was a nun called Sister Magdalene Mary. Now, she was the head of the art department for many, many years. And she herself was a rather innovative and very interesting person. But without her support, without her pushing Corita forward, she never would have succeeded the way she did. She would arrange all the tours, book the galleries, pack the stuff that needed to go. She made all the contacts, and then she would push Corita to the mic and say, talk.
If you're in odd rows, you know, like first, third, that kind of odd rows.
I had Corita for an art class, and it was one of the most exciting classes I had in my years at the college. She was a happening before they ever coined the word. She erupted. She just was like a little firework going off all the time. But she was a tough teacher. She had a very high standard of excellence, and she demanded that of all of her students. So, I mean, we just didn't sit back and bask and work and think how wonderful she was. We had to work too.
She got us in touch with the artist inside of us. I really didn't know that I could draw. I didn't know that I could see the way that an artist sees.
And she would just insist that you do it.
She would insist.
Yeah, it
right.
wasn't good enough to say, I can't do that or I can't draw.
Tonight you will do 100 pen and ink drawings of the street. And we did. And all of a sudden you were seeing things you never saw before.
She would give you an assignment on Monday. Come in Wednesday with 100 drawings, and we would all groan and say, that's impossible. But Wednesday you would show up, lo and behold, with 100 drawings. Then she'd say, all right, from those, now we're gonna do a collage from magazines. And then from the collage, now you're gonna create an embroidered banner. And we're like, we don't know how to sew. You're going to make these banners. And we did. And they were beautiful.
She just seemed to see the best in people. And in her students, you know. She really, I think, gave them each that sense that they had something to contribute, whether they were aware of it or not. She saw possibilities in you that you didn't know about yet.
I went with her when she took students to the car wash and gave the directions. Look at this and then look again and see anew and get rid of all your assumptions. I learned from Corita how to be open to everything, how everything can be a source of inspiration, how to see with new eyes.
She had a lot of interesting, exciting projects for us. A lot of times we went off campus. We went to Charles Ames' studio and we would walk around and observe the buildings in the area. Or we would go to a shopping area and observe the windows and the things in the windows. Or we would just walk along and observe the people. And then we would come back and give our impressions of the people on paper, of course, sometimes cutting out, doing collages, painting. We worked in a number of mediums.
I used to see some of the people in her class going around with these square pieces of paper, with this little hole. And I said, what are you doing? She said, I'm doing my homework. And Corita said, you have to look at the world, small pieces at a time. Look at just a small part of the world.
I think that was all part of her work ethic, to just keep people looking, because the first time we look at things, we don't see things. I think that's one of the things she tried to teach her students and future teachers, is to really look and to really see things. That's a great gift, to teach people how to see, to really see, to look, to see.
I think what drove Corita to work was simply that she knew she was talented. And I suppose it's oversimplifying to say she believed the gospel. To those who have been given much, much shall be required. That could sound like she lacked humility, but she did not lack humility. She wasn't boastful about her gifts, but she felt responsible for them.
She reinvigorated the whole element of serigraphy, which really wasn't popular at that time, and you have to give her credit for that. But you have to remember her first works were very religious.
I actually lived here above the high school as a boarder, and she worked in a little studio right across the street. All hours of the night, she would be pulling the serigraphs.
Friends, other artists, former students, current students would come and help, but Corita would work from morning designing and printing her serigraphs, and then she had other helpers to hang and to clean, but she did the rigorous, physically demanding hard work.
When I left the college and would come back to the exhibits through the years, there was always a big pile of new things that Corita had done. And the tables were piled with her work and the work of her students. And I think that she worked hard and demanded that others work hard because it was a way of being grateful for the gifts that you have and making use of them so that other people can enjoy them.
She was exploring, she was investigating, she was experimenting with things and coming to something new, and there wasn't this prescribed way of doing it. She was always pushing it in different directions and not necessarily going with what people said was going to be successful, but with what looked really cool to her.
She felt it was important to do art in the way she did it. It was very different for her time. It was so different from what art you think of as museum pieces and paintings and that kind of thing. And here she was making art using things that were popular, especially in advertisement, which is very common media, and bringing that to the public's eye.
I think she's also a very prayerful person without being sanctimonious or without, walking around hands folded. A lot of her spiritual values came through in her art.
I'm most appreciative, of course, of her artwork because it's wonderful to see how it developed through the years and how she stood at the front for peace and justice and the equality of all people.
During the Watts riot, for example, she immediately did a poster related to the Watts riots, and that was an example of responding to something immediately. She felt, strongly that something had to be said. But I think the year that she really did pop art was the year that she broke with Sister Magdalene Mary as a collaborator. And I know that it was a wrenching experience for both of them. And perhaps because they were very close, and yet Sister Corita's focus was very different than Sister Magdalene Mary's. And I think she must have said to Sister Magdalene Mary, "You can't be part of this anymore." Sister Corita was very interested in the larger condition in the world, and she was paying attention to it and suffering with it. difficult for, I think, the entire order at that time. There were big issues.
You have to go into Vatican II, and what the IHMs were endeavoring to do was live out the mandates of Vatican II and become contemporary people in a contemporary world to make the message of God's goodness more relevant to the people of today.
And they're not getting any of the marvelously subtle things that happen.
This was their goal, and then when they went to meet with Cardinal Francis McIntyre, he was very ultra-conservative. He was one of the 6 cardinals who attended Vatican II under protest. And so here we have, this progressive group of nuns up against a cardinal that wanted to take the church backwards 300 years. They were told that they could no longer be canonical, they would have to renounce the vows. Well, that caused a lot of pain within the community for those who decided to go forward and those who decided not to.
Cardinal McIntyre heard from all kinds of conservative, affluent Catholics that this woman was a danger to the faith.
So I think that was one of the things that really pained her, because she decided to stay with the order. And then subsequently, a few years after that, she left the order. She just had to go on and concentrate on her art and concentrate on that particular gift that she was given.
And when she left the college and the community in 1968, she said to me she was going on a sabbatical, but she never came back. Her later work shows how she deliberately slowed down. And she talks about the hard-edged work and life that she led and transitioned into pastels and a quieter life.
I have a feeling that maybe the first part of one's life should be very different, or could be very different from what one's second half is. I'm enjoying very much finding that second part.
So the work reflected her own evolution as an artist and as a human being. It was a change from the fast-paced demands of academia to a more personal, private life of the artist and the mystic. I think she was a mystic. Mm-hmm.
She always talked about gratitude. So to be grateful for all the gifts that I've been given, and that way I can appreciate everybody else's gifts without envying them. I'm grateful to her.
I learned this thing about really appreciating everything in life, looking at everything. I do that, I think. And personally, I find life mildly amusing most of the time. And I think maybe I learned that in college, too.
Time is the real teacher, and I think what you get with a teacher like Corita is you obtain a means of looking at your experiences. When you have a great teacher, that person lives with you throughout your life. You have put a little bit of them into yourself,
She had the habit of attentiveness that you couldn't miss. And there aren't many lessons more valuable than to pay attention. And I think I learned some of that. Not to the degree that she had, but that's what disciples are for.